Hello, hello, beautiful listeners. Let's do this. When we think about making a shift, it feels important. We care, and therefore our expectations rise. This is normal, and it has some real benefits. It's good to care. It's good to work towards something diligently and with passion. And there's a cost to this approach too. Oftentimes, when we care deeply, our shadow tendencies show up even more loudly. I'm talking about fear of failure. I'm talking about perfectionism. I'm talking about that feeling that we have to know more before we can do anything. And the list goes on. That's why in today's episode, we're going to look at a detour strategy, a way that can actually get us to the shift that we desire, get us to the learning that we seek, the growth that we seek, but that helps us bypass those roadblocks that tend to get in our way. Because frankly, we deserve bringing ease to this process. We deserve that. And it's okay to want that. This strategy, dear listeners, is called lowering the stakes. I don't know about you, but I have spent a lifetime raising the bar. And it has been on my mind, especially in the last few months, about what's the power in at first I thought about it, is it not caring? Is it that, for example, you've heard me talk about my learning path in skiing this year if you've been listening through these winter months to the podcast. And this last weekend, I I went out. I had one day on the slopes. We had a big snowstorm up here in the Catskills that kept me safely not driving for one day this weekend. But the day that I went out as I have been, holding my learning intention, let go and go fast, and really paying attention to just having fun. That's again, the stakes have been low. My self-worth is not tied up in how good of a skier I am. It is, I'm not out there to be the best. I'm not the best. I'm not out there to be the most grateful, but I'm out there to learn and have fun and be in my body and pay attention and see what other things connect. But the stakes are low. Like this is not a raising the bar activity. And what I was reflecting on uh, as I was preparing for today's podcast is that despite the fact that the stakes are very low, um, that it's not that I don't care, it's just that I'm not worried about it. And and the things I've accomplished are enormous. I have skied every black diamond trail on the mountain I go to now. I was afraid to get off the ski lift at the start of the season. Yes, I consider myself an athlete and I'm strong and I and I had other building blocks before I came into skiing. But skiing is not something that most people in their 40s are saying, I will go from I don't know how to do this to I will ski all the black diamond trails in a single season. And I really see how lowering the stakes is what allowed me to do this, because it cleared the clutter of all of that. I need to be good at this. What are people going to think? Am I worth it? And will I be good enough? Wasn't worried about any of that because I was just there to have fun and say, well, what can I learn this time? Lowering the stakes. So here's how we're going to talk about this in today's episode. I want to give you 3 things that you can pay attention to instead of all the other stuff that when we're thinking about shifts, like what are all the goals? What are, all the big things we want to do to prepare for a major life change? And again, as I said, there are times and places for that. But this is a detour strategy. If you're getting stuck trying to do that, here's another way around. So I'm going to give you 3 things that you can pay attention to, holding the framing that by lowering the stakes, we are not becoming apathetic. This is not about not caring. You can still care. You can still have passion. You can still really want this shift, but you're lowering the stakes as a radical act of defiance to say, I can actually get that thing I really want, but not have to hold it up above me as if it's something I have to leap towards. Instead, I can carry it down next to me, lower the stakes, bring it down to where you are. Say, okay, and now how do I throw my arm around it and hold it? How do I catch it? How do I play? That's the spirit I want you to bring into this. So that's what we're after. Here are the 3 things that I'm going to want you to pay attention to: technique, emotion, and art. Let me tell you what I mean by that one by one. So, technique, rather than thinking about I need a huge plan, a multi-step process, like what's a technical thing that you can learn that's moving you on that path? Emotion, what's the emotion I need to cultivate to move towards this shift? And then how do I bring flow, spirit, movement to it, like the art of it? How do I make it feel artistic? How do I bring art, an artful way of approaching it? So, yes, I have the technical side, the technique, and I have the art, the artful side of it. How do you bring that in? So, in the ski example, and then I'm going to play this out in a few more examples to bring this to life. In my skiing example, I lowered the stakes. So, I'm shaking off any of the how will I be able to? I did not start the season saying, how can I ski down a double black diamond trail? I mean, I can tell you for sure I started the season thinking there is no way I will go down a black diamond trail. That was not even in my consciousness of something that was possible. It was, in fact, if I had said that as a goal, I can tell you, I mean, just thinking of it, I feel a sense of terror. Like, no way. The first time I skied by a black trail this year, just like it's close to me, it's off to the left as I'm skating on my skis by, my heart dropped into my stomach. There was no way that by saying that's my goal, that it would have put me anything other into a paralyzed fear state, because I would have been paying attention to something that I was so far removed from knowing how to do that it was not a helpful goal. Instead, I was on the green trails focusing on technique. One step, then another step, technical, technical, technical. How including how do I put on my skis most effectively? How do I put them on when I'm on a hill versus when I'm by the lodge? Technical. How do I turn? Where do I place my poles? What's the use of the poles? How do I hold the poles? That was a later technical piece. It's something I'm focusing on now. And there'll be new nuances to what I do with the poles as I focus on the technique. Very different than focusing on how do I ski down a black diamond. I'm like, I'm not worried about that. I'm focusing on the technical side of it. What's the technique? Emotion. And it's different, changes week to week, day to day, even sometimes trail to trail. What's the emotion that I'm learning here? And so sometimes it's about finding joy in doing something I've never done before, and like bringing joy to it. Sometimes as I shared in last week's episode, when I noticed like tears came into my eyes, not at the top of the mountain, but when I got to the bottom, I'm like, ooh, something about going fast raised something in me. It's about sitting in discomfort, cozying up to the fear in a way that feels safe, but nonetheless sitting with it, cozying up to it. So, what's the emotion that I'm learning? And then finally, what about the art of it? So for me, and I've seen this when I was on the green trails. I remember I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm seeing this turning thing, but now rather than kind of making S turns or C turns or zigzagging Z's and these various things that I was playing with and learning on these beginner green trails, I remember thinking, okay, but now I'm feeling as I move down, I'm doing a couple of runs that are about integrating. And as I move my body side to side, as opposed to really focusing on, okay, my edge is turning and then I'm turning the other way. And where's my pull going? That was more technique. Now I'm putting it together and saying, how do I flow? And I felt myself shifting and I'm moving in a different way. That's the art. That's different. The most recent way that I was playing, this was just this last weekend, playing with what I would call the art, was so the technical side, the technique I was practicing is facing my heart down the mountain. There's an emotional metaphor in that for you. Facing my heart down the mountain, i.e., not literally, I'm squaring up down as opposed to squaring up side to side. By the way, I'm practicing that. I'm not doing it for sure most of the time, but I'm learning, I'm practicing, um, embracing the failure. But focusing on facing my heart down the mountain and leaning down the mountain even more, and it was really feeling my shins move. I was focusing on the technique of just moving my ankles as opposed to moving my hips, like bringing stillness, hips and above. That's technique. But the art part was allowing the back part of my skis to smooth out along the snow. And those techniques I was focusing on, the technical side I was focusing on, actually lifted my weight off the back of the skis such that they could flow. Because literally they're floating. They're lifting off because I'm leaning down. There's not weight on them, which happens when you're sitting in the back seat, which let me tell you, I do a lot of. So that's how I'm focusing on the technique. I'm paying attention to the emotion. I'm thinking about the art. Why am I able to do that? Because I've lowered the stakes. I'm not lost in the loftier, the goals, the vision, the strategy. Again, all of which I love and are important. But I'm back to basics. I've lowered the stakes. I'm not worried about it. That's how we can focus on it. What's the technique? Not what's every part of the technique. What technical skill can I gain right now? What's the emotion that feels like it would serve me right now? How do I put this all together in an artful, flowing way? Now, let me talk to you about this related to a team setting and putting into a professional setting. I am thrilled. I am about to embark on a trip to what I consider my hometown of Washington, D.C., and I will have the gift of sitting with 3 different teams and working with these teams on a lot of focus across these teams. There's definite distinctions, but a lot of focus will be on what are the strategic priorities and how do we work together to realize them? Connecting to the human beings, like connecting to one another in this work. There's a strong desire to co-create. That's These are not environments where it's directive, command, control. I'm telling you, and now you go do it. It's looking around at each other and saying, who are we? And what do we want? Okay, and therefore, how are we going to get there? And when we work together to get there, what could get in our way? So, how do we hold hands and move together anyway? These teams can also lower the stakes. It would be very easy to say, we're an executive team moving our organization to huge, really impact driven goals. These organizations have amazing missions and visions. That's why I love my work so much. It's so fun to get to be a steward of just diverse and really critical global priorities. Beautiful. You could see, like, whoo, you could lift up when we're addressing things like hunger and social equity and bringing professions together. When those are the kinds of things you're focused on, it would be very easy to raise the bar. But here's how you can lower the stakes, even as the leaders, even as the executive team, even as the board. How do you lower the bar, lower the stakes, and still create the shift that you want? Well, let's think about it. Technique. What's the technical side that a team might focus on in order to do that? It could be something like listening deeply. It could be, and in that process of listening deeply, it might even be the tactic of, let's bring radical awareness as a group to when we interrupt. Let's shift from using the phrase yes, but to using the phrase yes, and. Let's stop the practice of moving from agenda item to agenda item without clarity of what we ground it on. And instead, let's bring the rigor of naming what have we decided? What is clear? What is unclear? Do we have shared perspective? Right? Those are technical things, the technique of communicating and teaming together. Emotion. Well, let's take that technique of saying yes and instead of yes but. And it might be cozying up as a team to what's the emotion that's showing up for me when the impulse is to say but. Yes, but. And like listeners, as you're hearing that, when you even hear that, okay, I'm hearing you say that, yes, but what emotion comes up for you? There's probably, like as for myself, I feel it's less of an emotion and more of a physical feeling. I feel my hands gripping together, like there's a controlling desire, like, yes, but let me bring it back to my controlling point of view. So maybe the practice becomes, how do I bring a feeling of ease? Or how do I bring a feeling of open-heartedness? Like, breathe into that. How do I open up? There's the emotional practice. Art. Let's say you're practicing that technique. You're setting the emotional learning edge in their learning. Beautiful. And now you're saying, well, how do we put this into an artful movement? It might be that you have a rotating role of someone being the observer of the team, taking notes, sharing back neutral, observable facts of what they saw, but you're allowing the team, I said but, and you're allowing the team, just to practice it myself live, and you're allowing the team, as you listen and observe, you're allowing the team to just move freely. Like, so, hey, we have a technique, we have these emotions, we're all practicing it individually. Maybe we've set a collective intention around it. Now, let's focus on our real work that we have to do, not the business objectives that we're working on. Let's go to those big, lofty, the vision, the mission, the goals that we're working towards. With the knowledge of these teaming, this way that we're going to work together, these teaming goals, holding that knowledge in the backdrop. And now with someone observing us, let's dance. Let's play. Let's practice putting it all together, knowing that we'll mess up, just like Sharon's absolutely falling as she skis down the black diamonds at least 50% of the time. That's fine. We'll mess up. The stakes are lower. We're just practicing. We're just dancing. We're not talking about if we don't do this one technique right, or if that emotion flares up even though we're practicing being open-hearted, doesn't mean that we failed and we're bad and unworthy. We're okay. You're okay. We're just playing, putting it together. And that's the art, is like in that space of moving and flowing and trying it out. And because the stakes are lowered, letting it feel strange and unfamiliar and like you're a toddler taking your first steps. Like we're shaky. That's what I'm talking about. Like the stakes are lower. It's okay to be shaky. That's actually like beautiful growth and learning happens. Think about think about a baby learning to walk, learning to crawl. The amount of growth and integration that goes into that. They're not holding that as, will I be able to run a marathon at the end? No. They're literally just looking to walk like the people around them, like the grown-ups that they're seeing, right? The kids that they're seeing, shifting into a new way of being. And that, dear listeners, is what I wanted to share with you today. That there is such a gift in lowering the stakes. And instead of focusing on all the big picture things, a detour strategy to create those same shifts, to call in those outcomes that you want. Focus on the technique, the emotional learning, integrating it in an artful way, and see what happens. I'm going to put into the show notes a photo that my friend, an amazing ski coach, took of me this weekend. And I am towards the foot of, I'm past, you can kind of see in the backdrop, maybe it was a double black trail that I had just done. And I looked at the photos when they were sent to me after, and I thought, dang, I look so happy. I had accomplished something I dared not dream, because that wasn't the point. The point wasn't getting to be able to do that. It was just having fun. And as I've stretched my learning and remained committed to having fun and learning and growing, I would have been blown away by what I could do. And my wish for you is that you are also blown away by what you can do. Okay. Now, I want to tell you that if you love today's episode and are looking for ways to support me in this podcast, first of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And here are 3 simple things that you can do. 1, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. Click that plus sign, click follow, click subscribe. In this way, you get to keep up to date on every episode, and your subscription helps connect others to the podcast too. 2, rate and review the podcast. I am so grateful to the wonderful listeners who have taken 30 seconds to hop onto Apple Podcasts and gift us a 5-star rating. Bonus kudos to those of you who have taken a minute or 2 more to write a review. You can actually write, I just learned, 1 review per episode. So if there is some takeaway from today's show that you want to celebrate, that's an ideal spot to do it. 3, tell a friend or a colleague about an episode that you loved. Maybe it's you're thinking about something that you've learned today, or maybe something you unlearned today, or maybe something you relearned, like you knew it, but it's been reinforced. Ask yourself who else would benefit from this insight. and let them know that. Not only does it help me realize my mission to raise our collective consciousness about what's possible, it also helps you deepen your network connections and remind us all that we aren't alone as we do this thing called life. Finally, if you are looking for executive coaching, team facilitation, or visioning support, be in touch. You can connect with me directly on the contact page over at pointroadstudios.com or via LinkedIn and Instagram at the Point Road Studios handle. I read and personally respond to every message and delight in getting to know you better. All right. I am wishing you a gorgeous rest of your week. And until next Wednesday, remember, there is nothing stopping you. So go on ahead and get after whatever it is that you really want.